some faces, I got good connections. They dig my directions. When people say that's okay, they don't bother me. I'm ready to make it, don't care what the weather, don't care about no trouble. Got myself together. I feel the kind of protection that's all around. I come up hard, baby. I've been for real, baby, with the trouble man. Moving, going tight. I come up hard, I come up getting down. There's only three things for sure: taxes, debt, and trouble. Oh, this I know, baby. This I know, baby. Ain't gonna let it sweat me, baby. Hey, moving down the line. Though you may not drive a great big Cadillac, against the white wall, TV antennas in the back. You may not have a car at all.
Tell them about it, William DeVaughn. We on there, Brother Roland. That song came out in the summer of 1974, and those words are still apropos. Welcome all our Renaissance Man listeners. Renaissance Man, good to be back. Yeah, I may not have a great big Cadillac, gangster white walls, TV antenna in the back and all that, but be thankful for what you got. That's what I am. I'm sure Brother Roland is the same. When the song first came out, somebody did another version of it in addition to William DeVaughn, and they kind of jazzed it up a little bit, and they changed the lyrics slightly. And I remember we were standing around, and somebody played this version, and in the version, it says, digging the scene, the lyrics are digging the scene with a gangster lean, and somebody's had another version that said, digging the scene with a Philly lean, and somebody corrected them and said, no, gangster lean, and somebody said, no, same thing, Philly, gangster, so it wasn't no difference, but anyway, good song. Hey, but look, not to talk about brother. The brother just reminded me that since the last time Renaissance Man talked to y'all, the world turned topsy-turvy. What, 2 major hurricanes, and some people died within that time. Dick Gregory. And I just came across on YouTube an old album that I first heard in 1970. You guys might want to pull it up sometime, but Dick Gregory was a tremendous comedian, but in his later career, his comedy was focused on social consciousness, and he brought out some major points. He got some feedback from some people that wasn't necessarily friendly, because he was about telling the truth, but he did it under the umbrella of his tremendous comedy. And it was an album. This is back in the day where some of our listeners don't know what we're talking about. Talking about an album, with CDs and tapes now, and YouTube and whatnot, but there was an album called The Light Side, The Dark Side. And Brother Dick Gregory just laid it out. It was copyrighted in 1969. You guys pull it up. One of these times, Renaissance Man might even play an excerpt here for you. But The Light Side, Dark Side was Dick Gregory's, probably his trademark comedy album, where he was just completely making satire out of American history. And what is so amazing is this was 1969, and much of the discussion that he was generating back then is exactly appropriate now. In fact, it almost seems that what Frederick Douglass was saying, what folk were saying in the 1960s, and what people are saying here in 2017 are still the same. And lest you be under the false impression that everything is all right, you need to listen to some of the what some of our leaders and some of our spokespersons are saying about the state of the world today, and you'll see a striking similarity between this day and age and years past, particularly when it comes to the struggle of people of color, both here in this country and worldwide. But the one that stands out to me most, Gregory said, among other things, was that everybody in the 1960s had a strong opinion about protests, just like we do now. I won't say we, not we, but there are some people who have a problem with the protests and the manner the protest is being carried out, like Brother Colin Kaepernick, who's also my frat brother, KSI. But anyway, he is protesting in his own way, and some of his white brothers, Derek Carr and another blue-eyed brother, tight end with, can't remember which team it is now, also joined in. But there's always been a problem with protests. And the problem is always coming from the same people who would be the first ones to tell you that this is the greatest country in the world and we need to uphold the Constitution. Well, the very First Amendment of the Constitution gives you right to protest. So what I've concluded, brother, and all my listeners out there, is that this country is in many ways that of hypocrisy, in that the First Amendment is fine as long as the protest is an agreement, or if the statement is being made in accordance with what certain people agree with. But that's not what the Founding Fathers envisioned. Now, way back in 1787, when the Constitution was first ratified, John Hancock and Charles Carroll of Carrollton, Maryland, and T.J., James Madison, James Monroe, and Madison is given credit for having written most of the Constitution. Even in their slave-holding mentality, they didn't envision protests as only being protests for things you agree with, because the plain English meaning of the word protest means that it's in opposition to certain things. So if the Constitution includes language that allows protest, then necessarily things that are not popular are going to be asserted. But Dick Gregory makes the point, because in the 1960s and 70s, he makes reference to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and how young people at the time were taking that extra step and were making it known their opinions in public in accordance with the Constitution. And they were thought to be dirty hippies, and you haven't bathed, and you stand for disrespect against your parents and all that. And Gregory had to remind them that, yeah, but the very country that you tout as being the greatest on earth was born under the same circumstances. Because at one point he talks about how, so y'all don't like protests, huh? He said, what about that night in December of 1773 when all them guys in Boston dressed up like Indians and threw all that man's tea in the water? and y'all call it the Boston Tea Party. He said, so the next time you see some brothers up in Detroit burning some buildings down, why don't y'all just call it a Friday night fish fry? So that's kind of humor the brother, the points he would make. I know our listeners, some of our listeners may remember this. Brother Roland, you may remember this. But in the fall of 1968, there was a woman that worked on Wall Street named Francine something. And she purportedly was so well endowed in the upper pectoral region that she was something like a 52-inch. Now, I don't know nothing about women's sizes by numbers, but by analogy, I can think of, in fact, right here in the studio, I see some watermelon sitting over there on the table that the brother's out there selling. But so that would be the closest approximation I can make to whatever this woman was endowed with. But for several days, right there on Wall Street, every time she would get off the subway, without exaggerating, 15,000 dudes would come out of their offices and stand along Wall Street and watch this woman go to work. And yet those are the same ones that will call the hippies depraved and dirty and immoral. Yet they stand there and, as Dick Gregory so eloquently put it, to watch a broad's tits. And he said that one way Sister Francine could get rid of that crowd, all she had to do, well, even better than that, across each breast, on one breast put, "Free Huey Newton, baby," and the other one say, "Bring the boys back from Vietnam." He said them 30,000 men would have disappeared right then. Anyway, the light side, the dark side, Dick Gregory. Listen to it if you can. The brother's very prophetic. We're going to miss him. My regret is that I didn't know he was living here in D.C., and I might have reached out to him. The brother was very accessible, very amenable, and definitely very, very sharp. So we lost him. But in the meantime, though, brother, we have another incident of police out of control. And Michael Bennett, what position does he play? Is he a running back with
No, I believe Bennett is a defensive lineman.
Okay, which means he's a big boy.
Yeah, no, he's a monster.
Yeah.
His picture's right there in that newspaper standing next to Kaepernick. I'll get that to you.
Oh, okay.
So you can see him.
Yeah, maybe let our viewers see it right quick. But then his brother Martellus plays for the Packers, and ironically, the two of them going to meet. Okay, brother. There you go.
Martellus was in the Super Bowl last year.
Right.
Right.
And so Martellus has obviously some opinions about that, and wants to know if most of the NFL fandom will be empathetic to his brother's cause. In fact, when he saw what the police had done to his brother, Martellus actually shed a few tears, because if the allegations are correct, and the video seems to bear it out, is that at one point the police actually put a gun to my man's head. And now, see, when you start pulling out some heat and putting up at people's head, you know, Richard Pryor said, "I don't want to be no accident."
Be no accident.
And so,
You said, I don't want one accident.
right.
I don't want to be no MF in accident.
Yeah, at that.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's so when I understand, the circumstances were such that it was after the Mayweather Conor McGregor fight in Las Vegas,
Right.
and I guess there was which will happen occasionally. There was a brouhaha, outside the arena,
Right.
and I guess for some reason my mic doesn't work. Check one, check two, check. They don't like me today, brother.
Oh man.
I'll
So
figure it out.
Brother Roland is talking to us.
Himself right now.
Yeah, you might not heard what the brother's saying, but we'll get it straight.
Yeah, keep rolling. I'm gonna figure me out.
Yeah.
Somebody grab something.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about a few things today, and as usual, Renaissance Man will offer his book, you could go to jail, which can be found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble website, and iUniverse website. Is Brother Roland and I have told you before, it is a collection of various laws and statutes and regulations that are still on the books, collected from all over the world. Much of it is calculated to evoke humor from the readers, but is categorized as nonfiction because those are actual statutes. So you can get it at Barnes & Noble, and you'll be entertained. But see, there's two components to that, because what Renaissance Man is doing is he is making you aware of certain laws and statutes that are still on the books that you may not be aware of, but as long as they're in the books, they can actually be enforced by law enforcement. And when Renaissance Man started this project years ago, it wasn't with an eye toward all of the police misconduct that is happening now. But it's ironic that at the time of publication, it has even more of an impact than it originally did, because given many of the bogus reasons that law enforcement has stopped people, particularly people of color, and how it escalates, when you start talking about minor statutes that haven't been enforced for decades, and you're dealing with police who are looking for any reason or any ostensible reason to stop African Americans, this is a prime candidate for that. I've told you some of these in the past. Well, I don't know how many brothers would be guilty of this, but in Brookline, Massachusetts, you can't drive more than one horse-drawn animal at a time. So if you're in Brookline, don't put two horses up to a wagon. Okay, and and if you ever go to New South Wales, Australia, don't open a floodgate if you can help it, and don't jump from a moving car or a train in West Virginia. And in Washington, D.C., my hometown, it is illegal to enter a sewer. Okay? So make sure you don't enter any sewers when you cross Eastern Avenue over there. But this is in jest, but it's not in jest, because I can see law enforcement, those officers that are inclined to use some ostensible statute as a subterfuge in order to harass and arrest people of color, then certain statutes like that can be used. There's always the ultimate defense, though. In my experience as a defense attorney, I have sometimes used a defense called prosecutorial abuse. So if a statute was put on the books in 1910, and the last time somebody was arrested for that statute was in 1949, and here it is 2017, and somebody brings this case in front of the prosecutor, then a defense of malicious prosecution could probably be used, because it would be almost certain that it's been used as a subterfuge, because it's particularly if the arrestee is a person of color. And the other thing, of course, is that Renaissance Man always points out that if you either don't read Renaissance Man's book, or you read it and don't adhere to the laws, and you find yourself in that situation, then you can call Renaissance Man directly at 202-667-3664 for legal defense. And I'll call upon that fool down at the White House who promised to pay legal fees. I'll see if he'll pay my fee for you. Anyway, so read my book. But that brings us to Martellus Bennett and Michael Bennett. Your mic running again there, brother? You got your mic running?
It's up and running.
Okay. Hey, tell the listeners, and we touched on this a minute ago, allegedly what I understand, Michael Bennett was in a casino or some other, well, or actually the location of the Mayweather fight, right?
Right.
Okay. The first version I heard from the police was that they went into the place, and I don't remember why, but allegedly they saw Brother Michael crouching behind a casino slot machine or something like that.
Okay.
Then when they see him, then he starts running.
Okay.
And then they apprehend him and throw him to the ground and then put a gun to his head. Now, I respect some of the other sports commentators here in the D.C. area that come on some of the local sports stations. But I heard one version this morning on 980 where they erroneously suggested that everything was fair game because he started running. But see, I beg to differ with that based on my experience in the courtroom. See, flight in and of itself.
Right, does not constitute a crime.
Right. You could be fleeing because you got to use the bathroom real bad. See, so the whole premise got thrown off. So the position that some of the pundits in this town take is they pick the story up after he's apprehended, and they're operating under the premise that the apprehension was correct in the first place. And they start looking at, well, you know, once they had him down, yeah, they probably shouldn't have put a gun to his head. But so what we're saying is that, yeah, they should have never had him down. They should have never apprehended him. They never identified anything he did that constituted suspicion or probable cause that he had committed a crime. All he was doing was running out of the location, if that was him. Now, Brother Michael Bennett says that, well, first of all, he never did any such thing anyway. And when I was listening to the pundits this morning, they were comparing the two stories. Like, well, the police say he was crouching behind a slot machine and started running. And then as Michael Bennett tells the story, he's saying that, yeah, he was apprehended by the police. And some of our critics were saying, well, yeah, but he left that part of the story out. Well, he might have left it out because it didn't happen. See, there's never any allowance for the fact that these police could have just fabricated the whole story, you see. And there's been they're never called out for that. It seems that sometimes the story gets picked up under the premise that the initial police version was correct. And then they start addressing and analyzing the issue based on that. But see, we as African Americans know, and I can tell you as a prosecutor and a defense attorney, you can't presume that the initial story was even correct. And I think that's the gap between how we in our community look at things and how those from a distance look at it. Right. And I'm including those who would have the decency to know that police behavior is incorrect, but even they don't have the full picture, don't have the full impact of what life is like.
You know, and it sort of described this situation where different folks started running out of the casino or whatever, or like you said, duck behind machines or something, and it could have very easily have been, and I've seen this happen before. It used to happen at the mall a lot.
Yeah.
Remember they used to have National Day on the mall when
Yeah.
Joe Frazier and Ali would come down, and all of a sudden everybody would start running.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom grabbing me and we run. I'm like, Mom, why are we running? She's like, I don't know, but everybody else is running. So what's
Right.
the problem?
Right.
You know, but what happened was a guy had a boa constrictor around his neck. You know, brother, you know, biker had a boa constrictor. Somebody saw it and ran.
Right.
And when they ran, the next person ran.
Right.
It's like everybody started looking up in the air like this.
Right.
Guess what's gonna happen?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody start. If I go outside and I stand in the middle of the street and I do this, everybody else is gonna start doing that. So what happens then is, for some reason, and they haven't been able to explain it yet, of all the people that were moving about, the police decided to go after Michael Bennett, apparently outside of the casino, outside of the dwelling they were in.
Right.
And no explanation yet as to why him. You know, I presume he didn't have any arms on him.
Right.
I presume he didn't put his hands on anyone. But then that's where it gets a little cloudy because he said, hey, there's some footage, I guess, with them putting handcuffs on him.
Right.
And he said that they put a gun to his head and said, hey, I'll blow your effing head off.
Right.
Now, we know what's really going on. We know how it's going on. We know that police officers who want to engage in over-aggressive behavior toward black folks are now in a position to do it because recent history is telling us that they're not being held accountable for it, and that all they have to do is say, I fear for my life or something like that.
Right.
And it's a wrap.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that gets real tricky, brother, is that, what can you do? Other than hope that in court, like for example, Michael Bennett might try to sue and, hope that whatever, but you can't bring them up on a crime.
Right. Yeah, here's what you can do and can't do. First of all, as out of line and as over the top as police may be, it's still against the law to resist them. Now, if they're beating the hell out of you, I think you could probably justify fighting back when it's just so over the top. But the general rule is that you're supposed to submit to an arrest and deal with the propriety of it later. That's the theory. But certainly if it's over the top, I can see a judge or a jury saying, "Hey, look, this is just ridiculous." Of course, the brother was fighting back. But we started that premise. And secondly, is then your remedy is in the courts, because either the prosecutor goes forward with the case or he drops the case, and there's no real remedy from the criminal standpoint. In other words, a police officer cannot be charged with a crime because he arrests you falsely.
Because he's doing his job. That's
Right.
within the purview of his job.
Right. So consequently, but he can be sued, or his employers, the department, can be sued based on exceeding the scope of his job. In other words, if he exceeded the scope of his job, I've seen situations where the employer, the police department, comes to court and moves the court to, hey, this fool's on his own. In other words, if he goes too far out of the loop, then the department itself may make the argument that, well, we're not defending him. But if he's in the scope and course of his duties, then the department would get sued. So the bottom line is the remedy is civil and not criminal. This does little or no good for the victim, but I used to sit on the police trial boards, and most departments have an internal affairs disciplinary setup in which a internal trial is held completely independent of the criminal court system, and by and large the public or the victim never even learns the outcome of an officer who is brought in front of one of these. But so the consolation that a victim directly gets usually will come in the form of a lawsuit in a large settlement. But in many ways, the citizens are at the mercy of the police.
Of the police, and then at the mercy of the courts.
Exactly.
And it's, I guess as they say, that's the reality.
Yeah, that's
So we're counting on them. We're counting on them to be fair. We're counting on them to be rational. We're counting on them to use excessive restraint instead of excessive force.
right.
So that they can protect the lives of those that they're apprehending. And to be honest, in their interpretation of a threat against them,
Right.
and that they perceive a threat against them only in terms of clear and present danger, not a presumption, because they saw a flash or they heard a noise, or in Amadou Diallo's case, he came to the door, pulled out his wallet because he knew who they were,
Right.
and he was showing them ID, and one of the police officers slipped on the curb, and then they opened fire on the brother 41 times.
That's right. That's right.
You know, so we're asking for them to use a significant amount of restraint. And honestly speaking, I don't care if we pass new laws that tell the police, look, they don't have to go run into life-threatening danger.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. I mean,
Right.
you know, look, citizens have a right to defend themselves too.
Right.
You know, so if we're dealing with a situation where where it's one-on-one and they feel, their lives are at stake, I'm not upset with, they want to get home, I want them to get home too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they don't have to take that role.
Right.
As far as that's concerned, if it helps, a majority of cases against innocent people, if we can mitigate that on the other side by saying, well, I don't expect police to keep running in front of a bullet and running into a burning building.
Right.
Some of that we can deal with on our own.
That's true.
But also, police oftentimes respond to things after they've happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We often hear, how do we reduce crime? Well, we got to put more police. Well, even putting more police on the street doesn't necessarily reduce crime, because police respond to things after they've happened.
Yeah, very rarely would a police officer witness, a serious felony.
Right. They're there to investigate it.
Right.
They are called in to correct it.
They might every now and then get at the tail end of something and then engage with the
like domestic violence or something. And,
yeah.
There's a stalemate.
Or bank robbery. They might get there as the getaway cars pulling away.
Right, like we see on TV. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But while the crime is happening,
mm-hmm.
crime against persons or property is happening.
Right.
They're really in a position to stop it from happening.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're asking a lot of them. We're asking a lot from them, but one of the things we're asking from them, and they know. I mean, they're human beings. They know. They know that 90% of the time they're not in danger when they're pulling those triggers and doing those things to the brothers. I mean, he knew that. He knew that he was in an advantageous position with Michael Bennett. Michael Bennett wasn't, putting his hands on them, wasn't fighting anybody.
Right.
Right. They knew.
Well, you posed the rhetorical question a little bit ago as to, and you were saying, well, why would they single him out? Well, Michael himself had the best answer, because I'm a large black man.
Large black man.
Yeah, that's why.
That's why. And and it's always been the case. You find the biggest, blackest, and then you split him in half with a horse.
Yeah.
Then everybody else gets the message.
Right.
And not only the biggest, blackest, he probably was the fastest.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know what I mean? So you're running into a situation there where oftentimes he's guilty of the crime of being who he is.
Oh, all right, there you go. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, man, that's a tough one, bro.
Yeah. So now, with respect to the overall climate in the country and the protests, like Colin Kaepernick, okay, there are those who will argue down that there's some nebulous reason why he doesn't have an NFL job. Somebody even this morning, the same show, talked about how, well, he never came out and said, I want to play football. I mean, it's just uncanny the extent that certain people will go to try to justify something that is so obviously blatant. It's as though they're on some kind of mission to somehow disprove that racism exists in this country.
Yeah, fool in his mind are soon parted.
Okay.
I mean, so, nobody has to give a football player a job.
Right.
What you do is you give them a tryout.
Right. Right. If in fact he isn't.
Hell, you can be sorry and get a tryout.
Yeah.
And then they find out you're sorry, and then they cut you.
Right.
I mean, so we're not asking anybody to spend a draft pick on the brother.
Right.
All we're saying is has he proven enough with his body of work to warrant a tryout? Come on, man.
When you compare him to some of the backup quarterbacks in this league.
Anybody. You can compare him to anybody.
Yeah.
He's been to a Super Bowl.
Right.
He's had these kinds of seasons on his belt. He's been a major threat in the NFL. Defenses didn't know what to do with him for the longest time.
Yeah, they read
He's
options.
big, strong, fast, and smart.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, a tryout, of course. The only reason why he's not getting a tryout is because of the fury that came from him sitting out the national anthem. Period. Point blank. Period.
Exactly.
There's no other reason.
Right.
None.
Now,
Not even his contract.
That's right. I want to see what the NFL response is, and I haven't heard any, nor have I heard it from the pundits, when the White brothers joined in. You know, frequently when that kind of thing happens, all of a sudden what we saying takes on an air of legitimacy out of the blue. And I'm curious to see Derek Carr with the Raiders stood with his hand on the shoulder of, I want to say, I don't know if it was Marshawn Lynch, one of his Raider teammates.
Oh, Marshawn Lynch would be the guy.
Yeah, see, and then there was another tight end, and I forgot the team, but anyway, and as it turns out, his reasoning, and this, I kind of wish he hadn't said this, but he says, I'm married to a black woman, and I got black kids. And I'm great. I'm glad he did that, and I'm glad he stood up, as he should, because he has kids, boys, I presume, that could be subjected to all of this crap. But I love to see a Caucasian brother stand up with nothing personally at stake. Jake Long. I think Jake Long was Howie Long's son. It's one of the ones that actually, I don't know if he knelt, but he certainly spoke out.
Right.
And I want to see more of that, where people who don't have an immediate dog in the fight and stand up on principle.
Well, let's take this phone call, bro.
Yeah, what we got?
Bub.
Yes, sir. You're on the Renaissance Man with my man.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Man.
Yeah, hey, how you doing?
What's up, Renaissance Man? How you doing, brother?
All right, man. What's going on?
It's all good. I just want to holler at Roland, but tell Roland give me a call back. I know you're on air right now, whatever.
Yes, we are. Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about the NFL and Colin Kaepernick. Thank you for calling.
Oh,
sir.
man, that's a great topic right there, bro. That's a great topic. Y'all keep on doing what y'all doing. Roland, give me a shout back. Got some good information for us, okay?
Awesome. Only on the Renaissance Man show.
All right, Renaissance Man. Keep doing your thing, bro. We love you, man.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
All right, bro. We got some big things getting ready to happen for you, too, brother. Okay?
Okay, sounds good. All
right, bro. Roland, hit me back, bro.
Yes, sir.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is really, this is interesting, man, because you may be looking at a time in history, this current history, where this is about to happen, where those who don't seem to have a major horse in the race,
right?
You know, very similar to the mayor at New York City, De Blasio. After one of those situations, and he came out and he spoke very passionately against some of the things that were happening to black folks in his city, especially the homicides against black males by police.
Right.
Because he's married to a black woman.
Okay.
And he's got black kids.
Yeah. Okay.
And then he went to the hospital to check on an officer or something when they got shot, and then a bunch of officers turned their back to him.
Yeah, I remember.
Which was really tacky.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, which was really tacky, because it was like, you're standing up for them instead of us. Wait a minute. Why is it us against them?
Yeah.
We're talking about police as part of our community. There's no us against them.
Yeah.
It's not. You're making it us against them.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head there, brother. Because, see, here's the thing, man. If, in fact, the police claim, and I don't disagree, that most of us are good. Most of us, you know, are good people. We don't do this kind of stuff, and it's probably just a few. I don't know how few, but I'll go along with it. It's not all of them. Mm-hmm. But by the same token, then if you're a decent person, how are you not in league with those who are complaining about the ones that are bad? They should be equally outraged. When they look at a film of one of their brothers in blue whipping up on some unarmed person, or worse, killing one, How is that? How are you taking that side so that it's us against them? You should be with us if you're a decent person. That's the part I never understood.
Well, and that's part of that blue wall in general.
Well, I understand that, but see, I can't understand why that blue wall persists so much when they purport to be, upstanding people, and they should condemn that kind of behavior even within the blue wall.
I agree, and the reason why is because they got the courts, the laws, and pistols on their side.
Yeah.
So there's no disadvantage to, there's no disadvantage to law enforcement to not get into an antagonistic relationship with the community, because the community has no right to fight them.
Right.
At all.
Right.
So when you're telling me I can smack you in your face, and by law you can't swing back because you're resisting arrest.
Right.
That's a problem. I can shoot you, but you can't shoot me back.
Right.
Because it's not against the law for me to shoot you.
Right.
I can be charged, but it's not against the law.
Yeah.
But it's against the law for you to shoot me.
Right.
Then that means that I can shoot you.
Right.
And this isn't just white police. I know a bunch of black police officers
oh man, no question,
who go to the nth degree on it because it gives you the license to be a bully.
Yeah.
It gives you a license to be a bully. So yeah, it's a few bad. It's a few this, it's a few. But let's also let's be honest in saying that I know a lot of punks growing up who wouldn't come off the porch, who became police officers and got a badge and a gun, and all of a sudden they had heart.
Well, there you go. I agree wholeheartedly.
And they readily would want to jump in your face.
Right.
Because you're not allowed by law to do anything to them. So
as we would call them, a punk.
Exactly. So what happens is you have some that are like that who are Caucasian who single out black folks. You have some black folks who single out black folks. You have this guy down in Utah. I don't know if you heard the story with the nurse.
Oh yeah. How about that?
And the woman was just doing a job.
Right.
I'm like, what? She didn't offer you none? What was that about?
Yeah,
she was just doing a job. She was as cool as a cucumber. She said, "Sir, here are the rules. If you don't, do you have a warrant? No. The patient is unconscious, so they can't give you permission. And he's not on arrest. No." She said, "Well, I can't allow you to draw blood."
Right.
So he said, "Well, blah blah blah." She said, "Well, let me get my supervisor on the phone." So she gets a supervisor. Supervisor explains the position of hospital and says, "Hey, this is our agreement with you." I'm looking at the table. I'm like, okay, that was
reasonable way to handle it, right?
Brother Renaissance man. It's just like the guy who's walking with his hands in the air.
Right.
You cannot, or the brother who says, "Hey, I have a firearm.
Yeah.
I'm reaching to get the water like you asked me.
Right.
But I have a firearm, and I'm licensed to carry it." And he reaches for his wallet and you can't ask for. Now you got a pistol on the man anyway.
Right.
You can't ask for a better response than what she gave that police officer.
Right.
That joker said, "We're done here," and whooped up on that woman.
Yeah.
And put her in handcuffs and ran out there like he was God.
Yeah. You see. All on tape. And then you mentioned a couple of interesting. You'd be hard pressed to be any more compliant than the brother that was laying on the sidewalk with his hands off.
And said, "Don't shoot. He's autistic.
Right.
He's just having a bad day."
And there's still some that would say, "Well, he should have cooperated with the police." Oh, okay.
And he asked the police. I said, "Why did you shoot me?" The guy said, "I don't know."
You don't know.
He said, "I don't know."
Well, how about my man that was running away down in South Carolina? He gets out of the car. He's running away. Yeah.
Running away.
Somehow he's a threat, though.
Running away, I fear for my life.
Yeah.
He's running away.
Right. What
in
was
a park.
What was he got him shooting under his shoulder?
He's just Denzel Washington shooting behind himself.
Right.
And it becomes funny until but that could happen too. Because in the heat of the moment, not only do you have one person in the heat of the moment, both people in the heat of the moment.
Right.
I remember a situation where when I was put over by police, and the guy, I got out the car. It was at a checkpoint or something, and they told me to pull over. So I pull over, and I got out the car. There's a bunch of cars lined up. Some people were out of their cars. So I got out of the car and said, hey, what's going on? And I can't remember what it said. What it said, get back in the car, so I can't remember. Whatever it was, I remember saying, what's going on or something. And because I really didn't know what was going on.
Right.
And I wasn't being antagonistic. I didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
So, and this was many years ago, probably 15 years ago, give or take.
Yeah.
Anyway, make a long story short, I think he has to see my wallet. Has to see my ID.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And I can't get into my pockets in the car.
Yeah.
Because there's enough room.
Right.
So I said, well, sir, in order for me to get it for you, my wallet, I have to get out the car. And he said, okay, get out or something.
Right.
And then I said, what am I pulled over for? He said, just give me your license. I said, well, sir, that's fine, but I'm asking you, and in this and that, why did you pull me over?
Right.
Is there something wrong?
Right.
And he said, well, I don't have to answer that. And I remember responding something to the effect of, well, is it an unreasonable question? I mean, do you want to, and really I was like, is this an unreasonable question?
Yeah.
Now, I've learned later that, you just give me a wallet and then he come back later and he tells you what it is.
Right.
But this was a normal practice for me. To make a long story short, I don't know, for some reason he starts putting his hands on me.
Right.
I can't remember why. And as he put his hands on me, my first response was, man, hold up. And I did that. Get his hands off me.
Right.
And then it was like, do something. I'm like, oh, I get this. Oh, so my first reaction when you put your hands on me was I raised my hands too.
Yeah.
So once I raised my hands, now you have permission and permissibility, or whatever the word is.
Yeah.
Now it's a permissible situation for you to step back and say, you're resisting arrest or you attack me, and now you can shoot.
Yeah, and I fear for my life.
And that was it. And that was it. And one of them made a statement about how big I was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what they got to do with anything? Because I'm not doing it. I'm standing against the car. I don't have a weapon. I don't have a... And
you sound like Brother Michael Bennett. That's exactly what he was saying.
There was 15 police there.
Yeah.
I'm like, what am I going to do with you? I said, how can I win this one?
Right.
So we know what it is. I think part of what happens is, how do we address it from a political or economic standpoint? And that's what folks are trying to figure out. And that's why they're using, this situation with the protests. And like you were talking about for Labor Day, how Labor Day came about, what really happened, and so folks are using economic and other ways to get the point across. And if you don't, then nothing's going to change, period.
Exactly. Well, brother, we're going to take a little break, but I'm going to leave the listeners with our little trivia question.
Awesome.
And you have a chance to win Brother Renaissance's book, You Could Go to Jail. Okay, look, this coming Sunday, my favorite NFL team is playing the Philadelphia Eagles. I expect a lot of Philly fans to come down, including my two young cousins from Philadelphia.
There's some crazy folks.
They're crazy, but my cousins are going to be under my watch. So.
Awesome.
but here's the thing. I want any NFL fans, football fans, Philly fans, if you're listening, tell me when the last time the Eagles won an NFL championship. Now, let me caveat that. The Eagles, with all their bravado and their brashness, have never won a Super Bowl.
Ever.
Now, they've won 3 NFL championships before the Super Bowl era. Right. I want to know from our Philly fans or any football fans, what season was the last year that the Philadelphia Eagles were world champions? NFL champions. And if you know, who did they beat? All right, Renaissance Man's going to take a little break here, and we're going to come back to you in a few. Try to win that book.
Because had you not showed up in Chicago when that scene not gone out over television, there was a lot of people that just got so upset over what they had to look at rather than vote for Nixon. They just didn't vote at all. And had they not been so embittered over the Democratic Convention, Hubert Humphrey would have been the president. You know how much power that represents when 15,000 of you young folks can decide the fate and destiny of this country? Oh, there's a lot of us old fools who's real upset. Not that you showed up in Chicago, but because your appearance there created an atmosphere where Nixon could win over Humphrey. And the groovy thing about most young people got enough sense to know that between Nixon and Humphrey really didn't make too much difference, because when you're dealing with one of them stinking, nasty, slimy politicians, they all act the same. And you youngsters, as you work to change this system, is going to have to create an atmosphere where statesmen can enter the political arena instead of politicians. And so you have a big job. You know, it gets pretty embarrassing to me as I have to go all over the country and speak with young people and not only tell you that the faith and destiny of America depends on you. Not only do I have to say to you that you have to solve the problems confronting America tonight, you have to solve problems that you had nothing to do with creating. Yeah, these problems confronting America today, they were here before you got here. But thanks to us old fools, they will not be here when you leave. I say thanks to us old fools because, you see, we have created a situation for you youngsters that you have no choice but to solve the problems. Yeah, the generation of us fools that crossed right ahead of you. You see, not only did we not solve the problems confronting America today, but for the first time in the history of America, we used up all the tricks. And so consequently, you young kids have the problems but no tricks, and we wonder why you react the way you react, because you have no tricks. I remember when I was a kid, my mother, my father, the whole community taught me, one day you're going to grow up, boy, and white man going to call you a nigger, and don't get mad because God don't like no ugly. And sure enough, I grew up and a cracker called me a nigger, and I didn't get mad neither, because God don't like no ugly. You know, I got 7 little black kids at home right now, and me and my old lady ain't teaching them nothing. And if a cracker ever make the mistake to call one of them nigger, I can damn sure bet you it's going to surprise them. And out of the 5, I know 2 of them going to act accordingly. And so I say you youngsters have all the problems we left you, but no tricks. Let me say to you, I did not come here this evening to impress you, but only to inform you. And when I leave here tonight, I couldn't care less about what you think about Dick Gregory, because I'll always have the one consolation of knowing that whenever we wake up this year, next year, 20 years from now, you'll always be able to say, at least Brother Greg didn't lie to us. And that's one of the big problems. The establishment keeps lying to you 24 hours a day. And then after you catch us, we say, well, it's a generation gap. It's a moral gap. I stand here tonight and say, 2 and 2 is 7. And when you react to it, I say, oh, well, it's just a generation gap. Ain't got nothing to do with age. Bertrand Russell, who's 98 years old, can leave London, England, and come to America and be one of the youngest among us, because he's going to reach you from a high ethical, moral, decent standpoint. Because we didn't just start lying to you. We started lying to you way back in the crib with that Santa Claus boy. If you believe the first letter I ever wrote in my life went to a cat that didn't even exist, Dear Santa. Now, when your mama lied to you, damn near anybody qualifies to tell you a lie. Because that Santa Claus boy, he goes over better in the white community than he do in the black community. Because you see, not that we don't dig Santa Claus, we just know damn good and well ain't no white cat coming in our neighborhood after midnight, so we'll... And what's the number 1 lie we tell you young kids today? We say the number 1 problem confronting America today is the problem of air pollution. That's what we tell you. The number 1 problem confronting America today is the problem of moral pollution. This is the most morally polluted, degenerate, insane nation on the face of this earth, bar none. And you youngsters have the job of giving America her sanity back You have the job of making America the morally stable country that the founding fathers meant for her to be. And I hope you don't make the mistake that all these right-wing crackers make. They so busy running around eulogizing the country. America the beautiful. Eulogies are for dead things. And thanks to you youngsters, America is not dead yet. And I hope you will not make it a practice of eulogizing America. I hope you will go out and examine this country and find out where the cancer is and cut it out. America the beautiful. Let me tell you something. If you ever meet anybody that thinks America is a beautiful country with your Indian brother still locked up on that reservation, you tell them I said they sick, sad, and out of their damn mind. And this country will never be a beautiful country as long as that Indian is up on that reservation. And if it can be beautiful to you with him up there, then you in trouble. And the sad thing about this country, and I think the most embarrassing thing, is we are the only country on the face of this earth that lies about what we all about. Mao Zedong don't pretend to be anything else but a communist and a revolutionist. Them clowns over there in Moscow, Russia, they don't pretend to be anything else other than some communists. As dirty and as sick as Hitler was, he didn't pretend to the world. He let the whole world know that he felt them Nazis was superior to everybody else on the face of this earth. Them folks in South Africa, they don't lie. They let the whole world know they don't like them niggers. America is the only country that lies about what she is. And that should embarrass you. Regardless of how dirty the rest of the world is, they will own up to what they are. We say we about one thing, but we do altogether something else in this country. And so I say you youngsters have a big job. But thanks to us old fools, you waking up mighty quick. Yeah, that's why I was tickled to death over what happened at the Democratic Convention. Because 3 days after the Democratic Convention was over, a lot of you young kids woke up. 3 days after the Democratic Convention was over, the whole establishment tried to convince you that you did not see what you saw on television. They said it didn't happen. They said the press created it. You know, if Kosygin and the rest of them damn fool Russians in Moscow was dealing with the world as insane as America, you know they could beat that Czechoslovakian rap. Just get on worldwide television and say it didn't happen, y'all. Yeah, you didn't see it. So we admit we sent little miniature tanks to the Czech border for little kids to play with, and the damn press blew it up and make them look like real live tanks. But them fools in Moscow, Russia made the same mistake these old fools made in America. They plotted their little action, and they knew how the old folks was going to react, but they never took in consideration the reaction of you young kids. Oh, when them Russians moved them tanks into Czechoslovakia, they knew the old folks was going to be scared, but they never knew they'd see the day that young kids would run to their tanks and put SWAT stickers on the tanks. I guess it'd be the same thing in America. They plotted on bringing tanks into America. Sunday morning, wake up, and every church got a tank sitting in front of it and loudspeakers. Anybody try to go to church gonna get machine gunned to death. They know damn good and well them old fools ain't about to go to church. But what they wouldn't consider, that in America, young people that ain't never been to church in their life would decide to go Sunday morning. That's why you keep the system upset. 15,000 hippies and yippies came to Chicago to change the system. And the whole establishment got uptight. Now, mind you, that's a very important word, change the system. Because you see, that's what they was uptight over in Chicago. Didn't have nothing to do with what you kids was doing there. Didn't have nothing to do about tearing up the town. No. And to prove that, for the last 10 years, every spring break, you white kids been going to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, tearing the whole town up, man. And nobody gives a damn. They say, well, they're getting drunk. Boys will be boys. Ha, ha, ha. But Chicago It was that you was coming to change the system. And the whole establishment got uptight. Let me ask you something. Who do you think was the most immoral in Chicago last year? The hippies and yippies or the Shriners when they came to town for their convention? Who do you think committed the most adultery and spent the most money on whores and prostitution? The hippies and the yippies or the Shriners when they came to town for their convention? Nobody got upset over the Shriners because the Shriners didn't come to change nothing, just to buy something. You know what's interesting about television, if you look at it long enough, is bad as the programming is on television. If you just keep looking at it long enough, that thing will accidentally slip through. That same television set that showed you the hippies and yippies in Chicago 9 weeks after the Democratic Convention was over, that same television set showed you another crowd in the street that nobody got upset over. Of course, they weren't irresponsible kids neither, and it wasn't Chicago. You remember that morning in New York City, 20,000 sick, slimy degenerates came out in Wall Street to look at a broad's titties. Nobody got upset over the titty watchers. J. Edgar Hoover have yet to get on television and proclaim that titty watching is definitely communist inspired. What do you call 20,000 sick, slimy, degenerate titty watchers? Extremists left to right. And if Sister Francine is really sincere about not wanting to be watched in the mornings, all she have to do is understand the way these old degenerates think. Yeah, she hold a press conference tonight and say, tomorrow morning at 11:33, I'm gonna get off that same subway wearing one of the tightest sweaters ever been worn in the history of the world. And I guarantee you tomorrow morning in New York City at 8 o'clock, there will be 300,000 of them sick degenerates waiting on her. When she emerges out of that subway at 11:33 with that tight sweater on, if she sincerely don't want to be watched, when she emerges up, have two signs across her bosom, one reading "Free Huey Newton, baby," and the other one "Bring the boys home from Vietnam." Now I guarantee you within 2 seconds time, those 300,000 digits will be gone. Back into their Madison Avenue office to finish.
Come on with it, brother. Well, Brother Rollins, my main man. See, I did a unjustifiable job trying to imitate Brother Dick Gregory on that, the light side, the dark side that I happened across that I hadn't heard or seen in the last 40-some years. But my man poured it up, and y'all got to hear the excerpt, the exact excerpt that Renaissance Man was talking about. Very prophetic album, because you would think that he was talking about 40 years in the future. But the funny thing is, in 1970, when I was a college student, when that album was in its heyday, I never would have dreamed that 2017 we'd be having the exact same kind of issues. I would have thought with the passage of that much time, a significant change would have occurred. I would probably never expect this to be a utopian society, because as long as you have the two races here, and the races with the dynamics and interaction and the residual history of how the two primary races in this country first joined together, I would probably not expect there to be a utopian society, but I would have thought by now that you wouldn't have police officers just randomly shooting black folk. I mean, when I read an article about Brother Philandro up in Minnesota, or my man who was laying on the sidewalk down in Florida with his hands high in the air trying to say that his client was autistic, and that was 2016 to 2017, I guarantee, I promise you, I can find an article from a newspaper in 1916 talking about the same thing. And let me talk about a little repeat of history. See, a lot of people don't know, but Woodrow Wilson had one of the most racist, hateful, mean-spirited administration, two of them, as a matter of fact, of any president. Bigotry and racism was abounding, and in its heyday in the early 20th century, the worst it had been since slavery. Jim Crow was the order of the day. Lynching was no different from going out hunting a rabbit or a squirrel. And when Woodrow Wilson started his second term in 1917, 100 years ago, he immediately fired all of the mid-level African Americans working for the federal government. He immediately segregated all the lunchrooms and other common areas in federal buildings, and was vehemently opposed to an anti-lynching bill, which Congress was never able to pass. The only reason lynching doesn't exist because it just died out. No thanks to the powers that be. I guess white folks just got tired of burning Negroes at the stake and shooting them, and I don't know, but no thanks to Congress. Let's put it that way. And Woodrow Wilson was vehemently opposed to that. So I fast forward that to the election of 2016. 100 years later, there's a remarkable and striking similarity between the actions of the president who was elected in 1916 and the president who was elected in 2016. That bodes very poorly for any optimism that I might normally have about the direction this country is going. And what that does, it makes me and people like Brother Roland keep our sleeves rolled up. You know how you play football, brother, and you always play like you're 2 touchdowns behind. You might be up by 3 touchdowns, but you got to play like you 2 touchdowns behind. And I liken that to our place in this country. You play like you're 2 touchdowns behind.
That's a real interesting point.
Yeah, brother, but that's what we're working with.
Wow.
Let me tell you a story that is similar occurrences. I always go back and compare times. Today, September 7th. Well, yesterday was the anniversary of an event. And did you get those things pulled up, brother? Those images that I talked about before?
Brother, they wouldn't come up.
It wouldn't come up. That's
So
okay.
Apologies.
That's okay, brother. I'll tell our audience about that.
Awesome.
September 6, 1901 was a day in which the third of the United States presidents who suffered assassination was in fact assassinated. Now, I don't know if there's any way to do a makeshift image, brother, but here's one of the images that I was trying to pass on to the brother. We had a little technical difficulty, but if there's any way to show the audience that, we will talk about it. Anyway, September 6, 1901 marked the assassination of President William McKinley. And whether we get the image up or not, I'm going to tell you what happened. It was 20 years after the most recent assassination of a president, exactly 20 years. Garfield had been assassinated in 1881, so in 1901. McKinley had just started his second term, and he went to the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. He was told by his advisors that he should cancel an engagement that he had planned where he was going to shake the hands of all comers at the Temple of Music, which was one of the pavilions at the exposition. It is said that he shook more than 100 hands per minute. People just came by, they passed him through, he shook their hands, etc. 3 people that were in line were of significance. It makes for a very interesting story. The bottom line is he got shot. Okay, but here's how it happened. A little girl, maybe 10 or 11 years old, was in line, and she so impressed the president. She was a charming little girl. So the president had a good luck charm that he had worn for years, and he took that good luck charm off and gave it to the little girl. The next person in line was a descendant of Serbian immigrants, Leon Czolgosz. He was born in Detroit and had been a blue-collar worker. But he had adopted a philosophy that was in vogue around the beginning of the 20th century called anarchism. It had taken hold in Eastern Europe. It saw the assassinations of several heads of state, the president of Italy among them. And the anarchist was a movement that crossed the Atlantic, Eastern Europe, and many had ascribed to that philosophy in the United States. One of the more prominent leaders of that was a woman by the name of Emma Gold, and she and a colleague engaged in a plot to kill heads of state here in America. Leon Czolgosz was working in Detroit, and he had adhered to this anarchist philosophy. And talking to a shopkeeper one day at random, he discussed the fact that he was just so frustrated. And just to give you an idea what the anarchists believe, just like it pretty much indicates, they didn't like big government. In fact, they liked little or no government. Their philosophy was that the human race, in and of itself, based on the inherent virtues of human beings, doesn't need Big Brother watching. That humankind can exist without being under the watchful eye of the government. So much of their philosophy was to eliminate heads of states. Although Emma Gold, verbally condemned violence. However, she was connected to a few things, including this. Leon Czolgosz ascribed this philosophy. He told a shopkeeper, "Oh, I'm just so frustrated with all this structure in the world. I think I'll kill the Pope. And I'm going to take some liberties with this conversation. It probably wants something like this." The storekeeper said, "Well, I don't know how you're going to get to Rome. But rather than go all the way over there to kill the Pope, why don't you just kill the president?" Ha, ha, ha. Well, little did he know, Leon Czolgosz immediately determined that President McKinley was going to be in Buffalo. So he took to the rails and left Detroit and got to Buffalo around September 5th, 1901, where President McKinley gave his last speech. So the next day he was scheduled to shake hands at the Temple of Music. His staff, on a couple of occasions, canceled the appearance. And behind their back, McKinley rescheduled it. So all these people were coming through line, including the little girl who charmed the president so that he took off a good luck charm that he had been wearing for years, gave it to the little girl, and the next person in line was Leon Czolgosz. And while gentlemen normally shake hands with the right hand, the president noticed that there was a handkerchief around Czolgosz's right hand. So he extended his right hand to Czolgosz's left hand, at which point Czolgosz fired 2 shots out of the handkerchief, which was concealing a gun. The first bullet hit a button on McKinley's vest and ricocheted away. The next shot entered his body and lodged around his stomach. And my main man has got the image up there. So we're talking about 3 people in line. The little girl, she's not in this image. Then there's Shogos. And behind Shogos is a black man by the name of James Parker, who had just come from Atlanta to Buffalo looking for work. Happened to be the next one in line behind Shogos. And after those shots were fired, and after everybody kind of regained their composure for a minute, my understanding is that Parker administered a monumental butt kicking to Shogos, along with other people. I don't know what recognition Parker ever received, but as you know, Renaissance man loves black history and loves to talk about the exploits, those unsung heroes in black history. But Parker was the one that subdued Shogos. And of course, he was apprehended. And the Constitution talks about a speedy trial. The Sixth Amendment says that once you're arrested, the government cannot engage in undue delay in taking you in front of the criminal justice system, quickly giving you your rights, giving you your right to trial, and a speedy execution. Well, in all the years I was a prosecutor, I never saw it happen as quickly as it should. However, on this occasion, it did happen so quickly that between the time that the shots were fired on McKinley on September 6th, by October 23rd, Shogos was dead. They electrocuted him at the prison in Auburn. It was a Sing Sing, one of those New York prisons. But a black man was the one who actually subdued Shogos, and is given little or no credit in history. The president lingered on for a while. He was taken to a mansion in Buffalo, which I saw a few years ago. And in fact, it was the mansion belonging to the president of the exposition. So from September 6th to September 13th, the president lingered on. The bullet had lodged in his stomach, and they couldn't find it right away. And either from gangrene or from other complications from the bullet, on the morning of September 14th, President McKinley expired with the lyrics to "Nearer My God to Thee" on his lips. As he passed away, the vice president was at his side, who had been called to Buffalo, and at another mansion, which is still there in Buffalo, the Wilcox Mansion, Vice President Theodore Roosevelt took the oath of office and thus took over and became the youngest man ever to become president of the United States. Now, those in me and Roland's generation have always heard, well, President Kennedy was the youngest man. Well, there's a difference. President Kennedy was the youngest man elected at the time of his election. Theodore Roosevelt was the youngest man to become president, age 42, because he became president as a result of McKinley's death. But I say all that to say, in addition to the fact that Renaissance man loves to point out black history, but once again, that anarchist movement that was going on in the early part of the 20th century seems to be taking on a new life in the early part of the 21st century, but by a different name. It's called the right. See, and you can call it what you want, but you see, these are the kinds of things that lead to the collapse of governments. They lead to the chaos. They lead to assassinations. They lead to the abridgment of the rights of the citizens, and left out of control, all manner of havoc can be reached. So we turn to our leaders to prevent those eventualities from happening. But unfortunately, if your leaders are of the mindset, either through incompetence, mean-spiritedness, or for whatever reason, decline to protect the people's rights, but prefer to cater to a constituency whose philosophy is that of depriving certain people of their rights because of the color of their skin, but under the pretense of some other cause like they're taking our jobs, too much government spending. We need to enforce the immigration laws under the guise of those things. The same chaotic conditions that led to President McKinley's assassination can occur today. And as a final footnote to the assassination of McKinley before Renaissance Man checks out, history always has some irony. Do you know that while they were looking for that bullet in Buffalo, a guy by the name of Wilhelm Röntgen, Roentgen, had just discovered X-rays in Germany. It was a little too late. All right, Renaissance Man, love to talk to you today. Renaissance Man will be back next time. And oh, by the way, I almost forgot. Do we have any winners on our trivia contest, brother?
Let me look and see if I got any. Renaissance Man, what, any interesting things coming up in your near future?
Give me a category there, brother. Any
trips you're taking? Any historical? I know it's football season, but do you have any events coming up that you can be a part of?
Well, I'll tell you what.
Traveling.
There is a couple of potential Civil War events that our group does. We do presentations at various places, and I think some of those are going to become finalized in the next couple of weeks or so. So Renaissance Man will talk about those things. But that's all we have for now, brother.
Awesome. Do you have any family in either Texas or Florida?
No family. I have some friends that I've lost touch with in Texas and haven't heard from them for a while. So, so I don't have any direct concerns that I'm aware of right now, fortunately.
Awesome.
There you go.
All right, let me double check and see if we got any responses to the trivia. And I'm really interested in knowing his answer because I don't know it.
Well, here's what we'll do. We'll extend this question on to the next show.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because right after that, we would have woke up on the Eagles, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is that'll be an all sweeten the pot even more.
So you say you saw the boys for the exhibition game. How you think? I know I really hate asking these kind of questions because as a ball player to another ball player,
yes,
we
sir.
know we don't know.
Right.
But how do you think the season's going to go, or how do you want to see it go?
Well, I'm gonna say this, brother. I'm trying to throw aside all my fan loyalty and be objective. I think the defense has improved greatly, at least on paper.
Okay.
That secondary, it is the starting secondary is of, on paper, we got better talent than we did last year.
Okay.
I think we have improved on the front seven. Our boy Junior Gillette, who was hurt the last two seasons. They can get some pressure on those quarterbacks and a decent secondary. I think that defense will keep them in a lot of games. What I'm not certain of is how the departure of those two stud wide receivers is going to affect them. But I think that can be made up for if the defense plays well. So I'm looking at 9-7, maybe making the playoffs with a break here and there, no injuries, maybe steal a game, that they shouldn't here and there, and a little luck. I think they're going to be. I don't think they're going to have a losing season. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you always need a little bit of luck in football.
Oh, no question.
I'll tell you what, on receivers, you do have some physically imposing receivers in Josh Dotson and Terrell Pryor and Terrell Pryor.
Right. Terrell, I saw him in that preseason game. He missed a pass, but I'm thinking that he and Cousins will probably get their timing together.
Well, yeah, I mean, you figure because he wasn't playing much.
Yeah, but Dotson still wasn't on the field.
Still not on the field?
Yeah, I think he played in one of the preseason games.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And he tweaked something.
Yeah.
Again. But they got two tight ends, between Vernon Davis and Jordan Reed.
And I saw Davis on a couple of plays. I said, man, he looks younger.
Right.
So you get two tight ends that could almost run with receivers.
That's what I'm talking about.
So that's a plus. But did I see Will Compton is replaced?
Look, let's put it this way. That game I went to, without focusing on Compton, I was saying that boy's the truth. Man, he was all over.
What's his name?
Will Compton.
Right.
Not only on defense, man, on special teams, he was the first one downfield. That's how you endear yourself with a coach. See,
okay, we're not talking about the same guy. I'm talking about the linebacker.
I'm sorry. Will Compton.
The white guy, the linebacker.
Yeah.
I started seeing him running with the second string.
Well, one of them's out for the season. You talking about Trent Murphy?
No, Murphy's out. But remember, they had two young linebackers. One was named number 54. Will Compton one, and the other one is his name escapes me.
Not Ryan Kerrigan.
No,
okay.
Inside backers.
It
was Will Compton, and then there was number 54.
Preston Smith.
No, Preston Smith is on the edge too.
Okay, inside
what's
backer.
that guy's name? I'll tell you in a second.
But what about him though?
But the couple of glimpses that I saw.
We off, right?
No, we're still on.
I'm talking all this noise, brother.
Yeah, man. No, you fine.
All right, because
they still tuned in, man.
Okay,
I'm looking at them now.
Real Sauce may get ready to get out of here, though, so you might want to turn us off.
All right, man, we got you.